The crisis in Myanmar is rapidly worsening with the surge in military airstrikes and assaults by the junta, escalating over 300% in regions like Rakhine State. Since the military coup in February 2021, the country has been engulfed in a civil war between the armed forces of Myanmar and armed ethnic groups spread across the country. Thousands have fled, creating a refugee influx in neighboring nations. Border tensions are rising, impacting communities and businesses. Meanwhile, refugees face challenges in camps with limited resources. The situation remains critical and volatile as violence persists, prompting global concerns. Let's take a look.
The turmoil in Myanmar is deepening. In the last few months, airstrikes and ground assaults by its military junta have increased by over 300% in several regions, including the Rakhine states, against armed groups as well as civilians. A larger political, economic and humanitarian crisis is unfolding with distressing urgency. Since the military coup in February 2021, the Southeast Asian nation has been plunged into a civil war between its military and loosely organized ethnic groups. The UN too has sounded the alarm as the escalation of violence.
The Secretary General is deeply concerned by the increasing violence across Myanmar and strongly condemns the recent attacks by the Myanmar military that have reportedly killed scores of civilians, including in Rakhine and Sangeng regions. The latest incident targeting ethnic Rakhine in western Myanmar and the ongoing persecution of the Rohingya underlines the need for protection of all communities. Indiscriminate aerial bombings and human rights violations continue to be reported in many parts of Myanmar. Those responsible must be held to account.
The recent surge in violence in Myanmar has forced thousands to flee their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The United Nations reports that over 1.5 million people have been displaced internally within Myanmar and over 2 lakh have crossed borders into Thailand, Bangladesh and India. The influx of refugees is straining social and economic infrastructures. Cross-border tensions have increased, with reports of skirmishes between Myanmar's military and ethnic armed groups near its borders with India and Bangladesh. This is affecting locals and businesses near the border regions.
We can clearly see their warships. Also, their jets are often flying by in very close proximity. They keep shelling the other side. It is tense passing through the days here. We often jump out of the bed at night when they fight. We are anxious about whether this war may spread into our land.
Some 90,000 refugees are living in camps in Thailand with an ever-increasing influx, putting immense strain on its resources. Bangladesh, already struggling with the Rohingya crisis, now hosts an additional 4 lakh Myanmar nationals. India has taken in about 2 lakh refugees, mostly in its northeastern states. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met with Myanmar's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister on Wednesday, expressing deep concern over the continuing violence in areas close to the country's border with India. He also called for an early return to the path of democratic transition in Myanmar. Over 18 million people are now in need of humanitarian assistance, a 19-fold increase from pre-coup levels. The response has been hampered by limited access and resources. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reports that funding for refugee support is critically low, with only 35% of the required funds met. Disease outbreak and malnutrition are rampant in overcrowded camps.
The violence must end, the attacks against civilians must end, the forced conscription must end, and the denial of humanitarian assistance must end.
Globally, there have been calls for increased sanctions and diplomatic pressure on the Myanmar junta. The US and EU have imposed targeted sanctions, but their effectiveness is under debate as violence and displacement persist. As the world watches, the people of Myanmar and their neighbors continue to bear the brunt of their protracted crisis. International solidarity and sustained humanitarian aid remain critical to elevate suffering of the common people and restore stability in the region.